Welcome to Medical Myths, Legends, and Fairy Tales. I'm your host, Dr. Alan Christensen. Look, you know that between the latest online fads and the crazy media headlines, it's easier than ever to get confused about your health. And you and I just want to feel better and live longer. We want to know what works. And we can't wait for further studies. We need to make decisions today based on the best evidence we've got. Well, that's exactly what this show is here for. So let's get to it. Hey, Dr. C here with you. Let's take a deep dive into the iodine content of sea vegetables. Well, if you want the Cliff's Notes, they've got a lot and you're better off avoiding them. So there's that. If you want to hear the full story, hang out and I will have that for you. So sea veggies, aka sea weeds, kind of a derogatory name, they're not big staples in the American diet. They are a big part of many Asian diets, especially in Japan and Korea. And they're often considered to be generally healthy foods overall. You know, one of my early forays into different diets was into macrobiotics. And this is a world that breaks food down into yin and yang categories and then tries to balance them out. Many traditional Japanese foods were a big part of it, and sea vegetables were one of those. You know, as a young man exploring these exotic new worlds and on a quest to improve my health, they were kind of a fun thing to get into. They were completely unlike what I had grown up on. You know, growing up on a farm in northern Minnesota, we didn't have stuff that looked like that. So it was kind of a fun, almost like being in a special club or being in the know to be able to use these things and to understand them and have the culinary usages of them. And the argument, too, is that they were rich sources of certain minerals and vitamins. They were great to include. But we look at the iodine content in them, and it's absolutely insane. So orientation, real quick, we think about 200 micrograms being your safe upper days limit. If you're out to improve your thyroid, your upper days limit is more like 100 micrograms. And that's your days total from all sources, including your diet, your supplements, your cosmetics, your medications, anything else that's relevant. Yeah, all sources together. So kelp granules. Well, how much have you got for iodine in a microgram per serving of kelp granules? How about 81,650? Now, that's not always the case number, but that's the ballpark. That's where many assays have shown that. There can be variability, but no joke, let me run the math real quick. You can get 4,000 times the day's safe exposure to iodine from one serving of kelp granules. 4,000 times, not 4,000%, which is 4 times. Yeah, powdered kelp, that'll be a little lower. That'll be 23,000 micrograms. So this is now what? 1,000 times. Whole kelp, about the same. Wild kelp capsules, same story, 13,000 micrograms. Kombu. In my macrobiotic days, kombu is these little sticks of kelp, little rectangles of kelp that were dried. And the idea was you would drop those in a pot when you were cooking beans or rice. And it would impart some naturally occurring glutamate, some umami flavor. It would season and texturize them, and it was kind of a nice thing. So I would use that. Well, guess what? If you actually eat kombu per serving, it's about 13,500 micrograms of iodine, which is way too much. Sea palm, same story, 8,000 micrograms. Hijiki. So hijiki, spelled hijiki, I've heard it pronounced both ways. That's these little green fronds. I'm trying to think of a comparison. Kind of like rice noodles, like round rice noodles in terms of their shape and texture. A little bit harder texture, and they're totally, blackish green, like really dark green. But you often find that as a side dish. Not often, but it's a rather exotic thing. But it's used in traditional Japanese cooking and also in macrobiotics. And yeah, it'll give you 300 times your day's safe allotment. No, that's not right. 30 times your day's safe allotment of iodine per serving. Wakame. This is the stuff if you ever get miso soup in a sushi place and there's these little floating green flecks in your soup or filaments in your miso soup, that's wakame. I would use that one too. And that's crazy high. That's 2,700 micrograms per serving. 4,300 micrograms per serving. Bladderwrack is also high. Dulse. Dulse is one where it's these kind of mahogany red. It's a really pretty color. and it's mostly from Atlantic, like Maine area. And I've been told that in Quebec or areas around there, they'll serve that the way other bars will serve pretzels. They've just got it sitting out to snack on. And it's a tasty snack, kind of a subtle fishy taste, but kind of like a jerky flavor. But no, it's, 700 micrograms of iodine per serving. The lowest on this list would be nori. Now, those are the big green sheets that come into play with wrapping sushi or having a seaweed snack. So each sheet is somewhere around 70 micrograms of iodine per sheet. So if you're having a sushi roll, for example, that's one sheet of nori. Personally, we make sushi at home, especially since starting in early 2020 when we quit going out for almost any reason. And I've gotten the hang of that pretty well. So I try to keep my iodine intake at that safe threshold, that couple hundred micrograms. So I'll just really be cautious of any yellow light iodine foods, and I'll have a sheet of nori every now and then. Other sushis we can make without nori. As a seaweed snack, in most cases that's about one sheet worth. By and large, if you're working to improve your thyroid function, you would avoid nori. If you're stable, it's going great, you can do a sheet every now and then, not that big of a deal, but otherwise it would end up being too much in the context of your day's intake. And this is a thing, unless your diet is solely raw fruits and vegetables, it's almost impossible to go under somewhere around 30 to 50 micrograms per day. Even if you're doing all low iodine foods, you won't go under that range because there's just a little bit in so many foods. So on top of that extra 70 or more micrograms from a sheet of nori, that can push you over the edge if your goal is less than 100. When I talk about this, I'll mention about the relevance of sea vegetables, their high iodine content, and the question I always get is, but aren't sea veggies healthy? Well, so healthy, we can think of that in a couple ways. They can have desirable nutrients, so in theory they should be healthy then, but what are the outcomes in populations that consume them? And do they have things that you do not want to consume? So this is a deeper way to think of it. We always put observations over theory. The theory is that if a food has vitamins and minerals, then we'd want more of that food. And if you heard my talk about salt, you learned that Doritos have more nutrients than sea salt has. So that doesn't mean they're healthier foods. But so even though there's nutrients there, we want to look at the health outcomes. And what we see based upon multiple studies is that hypothyroidism and hyperthyroidism have been shown to be more common in populations with higher intakes of sea vegetables. For populations that do consume them, they are by far the highest source of iodine. And a recent study showed that the population's iodine status is predictive of total mortality risk. You heard that right. Those who are higher in iodine have more risk for total mortality than those who are lower in iodine. Extra iodine can kill you. There's just no other way to mince words about that. And we think a lot of that comes down to its rate in changing thyroid disease. So what's more not to love? Well, sea vegetables from all parts of the world are also known to carry unsafe amounts of arsenic, cadmium, lead, and mercury. These are binding plants. They bind up with all sorts of minerals in the ocean, good ones and bad ones. So they are amongst the most contaminated products we can find. General health benefits have shown that if you're adding sea vegetables to your diet, we can see a 3.8 times risk increase for thyroid cancer in menopausal women. In fact, many health agencies recommend avoiding sea vegetables for pregnant and lactating women due to the high amounts of iodine and heavy metals. So, my thoughts way back when, during my macrobiotic experimentation days, were wrong. Sea vegetables aren't inherently healthy. They are a bit of an indulgence. And if your goal is to maximize your health and improve your thyroid function, they're not things you're going to find in your diet on a regular basis. So, yep, Dr. C with you. And thankfully, there's so many great food options. You don't have to be restricted, but those are just good ones to avoid. I'll talk to you again really soon. In the meantime, take great care of yourself. Hey, Dr. Christensen here. Thanks so much for joining me for another episode. Is there a topic you'd like me to cover? I'd love to hear from you. Just go to dralanchristensen.com on Facebook or Instagram, write your question, and use the hashtag #MedicalMyths. Did you find this show helpful? If so, please take a minute and leave us a rating on iTunes so that others can know. Thanks much, and I'll be back with you real soon. Bye-bye.